What we're doing here is we are counting the birds that occur or in the wetland or surrounding the wetland, and the other group go 400 meter on the west side, far away from. So we try to avoid the duplication or double count, so that we make sure those birds that we count is different. Okay, so here we do first thing that we have the wetland. We have the name. There's a local name. They know all the wetland name. So they have the local name. We also have the ID for the scientific. So we have the wetland ID where we put it later on, so we can link, all data together.
Bow finish? We were doing a census of birds in this wetland, and what our interest is to understand the role that these wetlands play in the broader forest community. So what I've seen over the years is that when you see a dry dipterocarp forest, you'll see lots of different animal species. You'll see many different species of birds and mammals and reptiles. But you don't see them in very large numbers when it's just the forest system. But when I see areas that have a lot of these small scattered wetlands, I have the impression that we see a lot more species that are using that area. So you could have more gaur or more bentang or more cranes and more storks and more lots of birds that kind of use these sorts of wetlands, but also use the open forest. And so what we're trying to do is both understand how these wetlands are created, that they are real wetlands or not, and what role they play in the forest ecosystem. And so we're just comparing the birds that we measure here in the wetland and the surrounding forest, and then comparing that to the surrounding forest, or just the forest without the wetland area.
But we draw the map of the wetland and upland, and whenever we hear or we saw the bird, we can map them where they are, so we know what kind of habitat that they use. So like here we have the oriental magpie robin that right on the wetland, so we know that they using this wetland very much at this time. The other species like red-breasted parakeet is outside the wetland and is on the tree. So we think because they did not come down to the wetland, but they use the tree, the wood tree, surrounding. So it's a different tree in the open forest. The hypothesis that we rise up were either whether wetland or forest. We think that wetland is more birds come to the wetland to eat because it have more resources like insect, frog, fish, and the trees around also evergreen. In the forest, no leaf in the dry season, so they tend to come to the wetland. That's what we think. But to prove that, we have to do the scientific, estimating.
And we always have these pairwise comparisons. So ultimately what we can do is if there's no difference between them, you subtract the number of species in one from the number of species of the other, and you always should get zero. And it's easy to say, well, does that number, when you look at all the different wetlands that we look at, does that number differ from zero or not? If it differs from zero, our prediction is that wetlands, or the areas near wetlands, will have more species than the areas that do not.
So after counting the bird, then we try to describe the wetland. So we write down the character, but we just do some estimating, simply that we say the morphology of the wetland, and we try the connectivity to the stream. We don't have time during the counting to write the full name of the bird, so we just have, the code like a C app. This means Chinese francolin, something like that. So that's in the end, and we meet up the other team, and then we just, ask some question, and then we move on.
To the geology formation of the whole area here. So the soil very formed here at the beginning. Maybe it's mixed sand, clay, and silt together. But later on, during a period, maybe the drought happened very long, and due to the drought happened very long, the people may dig some wetland like this to store water. And the drought period happened very long, so many fire happen. So when the fire happen, it heating, and you can see it's something like here, heating. The soil become very hard, like rock. Like rock. So the layer with the fire material like this become very good indicator layer for this identified wetland here. So with the wetland, if we select the deepest area, and if we could not find this layer, it means that the people digging it, they bring the soil somewhere to make the road or to build the temple, something like. So that's why the whole soil profile will be the clay material only. But with some wetlands, the clay material mix up with the fire material, as we can see here. That wetland indicated the disturbance may make it by animal. So to identify the natural wetland here, we need to identify the indicator layer. The indicator layer of this area is the fire material. Yeah, so that looks very clear. The yellow color here can tell you during the past, there are some year it happened very dry. So that's why the iron oxidized from ferrous to ferric. It turned to very dark yellow color, as we can see. So we can say that long time ago in this area, maybe very well organized village. Here, the people, they know how to use the material to build the road, how to use the material to build the temple, or to build the house. At the same time, they know how to make a deep area to collect the material. And that material, when exposed to the air, it becomes very hard, like rock. Secondly, they know how to keep the water. One of the reasons of the very well organized village here had to move somewhere, or the population here decreasing very quickly. One of the reasons is the water deficiency.
I will set a plot, 1 meter plot, and calculate the coverage area of each species in 1 meter plot. First I calculate how many species in the plot, and then the percentage coverage of each species. Yeah, this is the two things I calculate in one. For each species, I will take the sample. I put in the bag and I bring back to the station, and I press the specimen. After that, I need to check for further identification. I need to look in some flora and some book to make sure of the identification of the plant, because sometimes it's not easy to identify in the field because there is no flower, no fruit sometimes. So you need further check. Especially grass, they are very similar. Only some small character can be different species. After identification, so I have the name, the list of the species in the wetland. So we have the list of the species and also the percentage coverage of each species in the plot, and then we will do some calculation to see how is the abundance of which species, and they can indicate telling us about the wetland. Like for some species, they only occur in a very deep water zone. The zone that have a very deep water. Some species only in the upland.
Eight, 38. 38 meter? Yes.
We go to each wetland, and we've gone to 5 wetlands each day. And at each wetland, people split into their groups and they do their sampling. So Vidun and I are using 4 different methods to sample for fish in the wetlands.
In this project, in the fish biodiversity in the wetland, so I conduct the fish sampling each wetland.
There are 2 active methods and 2 passive methods. And active just means that you're moving while you're doing the sampling. So the 2 active sampling methods we use are the electrofishing. And also the seine netting. And then the 2 passive methods that we use are the minnow traps and gill nets. And the reason that we're doing so many different methods is because each wetland is slightly different. Some are shallow, some are deep, some have a lot of grasses in them, and some are open. And each method is a little better for sampling in these different conditions. And so wetlands are either isolated or they're connected some way to either other wetlands or to streams and rivers. And so fish can use the wetlands as habitat for spawning, for feeding, or for just rearing. The juvenile fish can come onto the floodplain to rear the wetlands. And so these wetlands can act as many different habitats for fish. And some fish are found in wetlands year-round, and some fish are only found in certain seasons.